world where achievements and accolades motivate us to do more and be more, we're often left wondering, is this really it?
Deep inside, you know there is more to life. You're ready to leave behind the old, push your way through, and claim the deeper life that's calling you.
That's where we excel.
We're your hosts, Stephanie Allen
and Maren and
and this is the Soulful Leader Podcast.
Sit back and relax as we share the shortcuts we've uncovered to help you make shift happen.
Hi, welcome to the Soulful Leader Podcast. Excited to be here today and this week. We've been speaking a lot about conditioning. Isn't it amazing how we can be so unconscious about the patterns in our lives until something that really matters to us actually wakes us up? And so what do I mean like wakes us up? It makes us irritated, frustrated, maybe even joyfully. We are excited about something that maybe we haven't quite feel like we've connected with enough. But it's like, it's based on all of these things that we've told ourselves that keeps us separate. So I've been really practicing a lot this week, or contemplating, I should say, that I'd like to practice a lot more. And I realized that, that part that says, oh, I want to practice more, I want to do more, is also conditioning. That there isn't in our culture an acceptance of just being, literally allowing ourselves. And I heard just recently that sometimes when you're not practicing your skills, or if you're a musician or an athlete, there's certain practices that we do to become better. And then when we don't practice, it's actually harder to do that skill. Well, when we're talking about the soulful leader, there's certain practices to do to become more soulful, more connected. And so that part of me, which was conditioned to do more, be more, all those kind of things, was really beating myself up that I'm not enough, that I needed to put more time and more energy. And so I was with a guide, a spiritual person here just a few weeks ago, and they had mentioned that sometimes not doing the practice is actually the practice. That it was going to build longing, so that when I was ready to sit down to actually practice, my heart was opened. Rather than just, and we've said this before, I know Maren and I've talked about it before, it's like, I have to do this versus I get to do this. It comes from a different place. So we thought this would be a great dialogue today to talk about conditioning and where we've been conditioned to believe either we're not good enough, or we have to do more, we have to learn more, we have to take different actions, but that is a conditioning. And how do you let go of that? How do you unlearn?
Yeah. Wow, there's a lot to unpack in that first little section there. That was great. So one of the things that that you were talking about is, athletes. And when you put practice into something, say, for example, you're a tennis player, and if you put your effort into playing tennis and you become better and better and better, and you become a very good tennis player. And I think most of us understand that for me, I don't play tennis. So if I were to walk on a tennis court, I would not expect myself to be a good tennis player. I understand that it takes practice in order to be a good tennis player. And as leaders, and many of our listeners are business leaders, they understand I guess this is kind of gets to be a gray area, actually. You need practice to be a business person. And the reason I say it's a gray area is I come from a line of artist entrepreneurs. And what happens for a lot of artists, and this is true across the board, is meaning that across the board of artistic endeavors. So mine is dance, and it could be any type of a passion or an art or a craft that you get very good at, is you get good at it, and then people start asking you for lessons or to help them. And it could be a hobby entrepreneur, right? Maybe that's a better word for it. And you get better and better at giving, you because you've worked on it yourself, now people are asking you to help them to learn it better. And there's actually 3 different skill sets that are happening One of them is the one that you've practiced, which is your original art or hobby. For me, it was dance. The second is the art of teaching, which is a totally different skill set. And many people don't even understand that. And the third one is the art of business, which is a third skill set. And so now there are a lot of people out there that are in leadership positions or in business positions that they haven't worked on those skill sets, and they don't understand why their business isn't working, or why maybe the people that they're teaching are not as good as somebody else's students, or, there's all these levels. So taking it back to what you were talking about with conditioning is, I think there are a lot of assumptions that we make as far as what we're supposed to know, just because, well, I'm doing it, I'm supposed to know it. And I want to take that to like the core of living. Like, we're supposed to know we are born, so of course we're just supposed to know how to be full spectrum human beings. And there are practices there to get to that next level of what does it truly mean to be a full spectrum human?
And I think there can be so much shame. We've talked about shame in the past, like, that whole acronym of shame is should have already mastered everything. It's like we get to these places and we go, I should already master this. Otherwise I wouldn't be here unless I've mastered it. So therefore I have to fight to hold that center instead of, I'm going to make another metaphor here, but it's like when we talk about conditioning and unlearning, because we're conditioned to believe those things, or we're conditioned that we're supposed to be a certain person or do a certain thing. But that's like the metaphor of having like our glass is already full. There's no space to explore. There's no space to ask that question or any question. So it's like our cup is already full. We can't take any more in. We're max. And I know we've spoken in other podcasts about the iceberg. It's like you're just seeing the tip, but there's so much of a mass underneath the water in that iceberg that's already full. And if we don't address the full cup or the full iceberg underneath, there is no space to change. There is no option to learn, or because we need to unlearn, or we need to let go of prior conditioning. And that's that beginner's mind.
I think that like one of the things that is happening is we think we are the 10%. Right? And that's our conditioning, is we're conditioned to believe that everything, that we are doers. And we've talked about this before, that we're actually human beings, not human doings. And what is it like to be in our lives? And we're not taught that at all. We're taught how to do things. From day one, it's how to do things, and that we are judged by what we do, not who we are. And so we come to this belief that we are that 10%, and we work really, really hard on that 10%. And there's this 90% of who we are. And like you said, we don't have space because we've filled our cup, our belief system with that 10%. So where do we find the space to like look at, well, 90% of me is actually completely unknown to me. And that's a concept right there. Like, if you sat with that for a few minutes every day of like, there's 90% of me that I know nothing about, that would open some doors.
And to sit with that 90% instead of saying, I've got to start doing something, maybe it's about what do you need to stop doing so that you can get to know that 90%.
Make some space. It's like when we did the feng shui and we talked about making, like there's clutter in our lives because it helps to slow down the energy. And when we clean out that clutter, we have extra energy. And sometimes that's overwhelming, so we put the clutter back.
And if we don't do the internal, like I was having a dialogue with someone today of saying, it's not about being ashamed that there's clutter in your room. Let's look at it as a gift of saying, maybe it's helping you slow down a little bit so that you can go in and empty that cup, that clear that 90% of the iceberg that's underneath the water, so that when you go to move the clutter, it's going to be much easier for you, because it's just a mirror of what's going on internally with the clutter.
Yeah.
So it's not about start doing something. It's not about start cleaning it up and start doing this. It's about, what do I need to let go of? What thought, belief, or attitude or habit that's taking up so much energy and time and space for me that I need to stop or say no to.
You know, we hear this a lot about people who talk about relationships. They say that, you know, like, until you actually do your inner work, you will keep manifesting the outer, that same relationship over and over again. And it may not be, you know, like I'm in a relationship and, you know, whatever it is not working in the relationship. And so I exit it and I create a new relationship and I fall in love again. And I was like, oh, this one's wonderful. And then I find myself in the same position, and it'll take a couple of years most of the time. Things are speeding up, so maybe it'll happen faster. And what we don't realize is, I think that, you know, people have heard of that. And that happens in pretty much every aspect of our lives. And since we are talking to leaders and business people, it happens in our businesses too. So when you find that, you know, and we were just talking about with the clutter, right? It happens, the same pile shows up in the same place. There are places in our lives where they are gifts for us. They're doorways for us. They're things that keep showing up over and over for us, so that it gives us an opportunity to stop. And maybe this time around, instead of just saying it's out there, it's the business problem, it's the person that I'm in the relationship with, it's their problem, it's the fact, it's beating myself over the fact that I can't keep that little space clear of clutter. It has nothing to do with what's out there. It's time to take that moment and go ask a deeper question, which we've talked about, of like, what would it look like if it's not something that's out there that needs to be fixed, or it's not something that needs to be fixed at all. It's something that I have an opportunity to stop and be aware of inside of me.
I think that's so beautiful, like to shift that, because we can be really hard on ourselves.
Really?
And, you know, yeah, really hard on ourselves, and use a lot of energy and emotion and trying to fight it or hide it or push it away or justify it or all those different things. And you and I were just speaking, and you had reminded me that it's like, you know, when there's kind of an emotional response to something, it's because you actually care. You actually care. It's like you would use the example of, like, you know, if someone said that you're a really bad skier, you're like, yep, I am.
I don't
not
ski,
really my
so
thing.
I don't care.
Ski. It's not really my thing. I really don't care. You know, but it's because you're a professional dancer. If I said to you, oh, you know, Maren, your dancing sucks. You know,
I would be like, hurt. I need to educate you.
Right. It's like, you're going to be defensive. It's like, I'm like, isn't that a great way of looking at it differently? It's like when the emotional charge comes up around something, you know, whether it's around your relationship or whether it's around, you know, business in the outer world, like maybe I'm not being successful the way I want it. If there's something that's really irritating you, it's because you really care a lot about it, and that your cup is full, and perhaps there's something you're ready now to deal with, to let go of. A different way, a habit, a being, you know, a thought, an attitude that you're ready to say, I need to change this. I'm ready to let it go. It's not about fixing it. It's about, like, literally making space for it. And that's what emotion does. I could say that, you know, emotion, energy, emotion. Like, if there's an emotion, you're actually making space. You're actually doing some inner house cleaning. And I love that. I love that. It's a different way of looking at it.
So I do want to make a point of, just having the emotion running is not the inner house cleaning. So the emotion that's running can run us. And if you've ever heard of Joe Dispenza, he does some great work with thoughts create feeling, create thoughts, create feelings, create thoughts, create feeling, right? And so you get into this loop, this endless loop. And if you stop for a moment and you really ponder that, if you give it a thought, when I'm in that emotional runaway, I'm not able to make space. And literally, if you could take just a moment and recognize it and go, oh, that thought is running me, or that feeling is running me, right? You can shift that so that it's not anymore. And then the emotion can be a release and you can let it go.
And this is where we need each other, because we can get very caught up in the wheel of samsara. We can get that little hamster wheel that runs and runs around. We don't go anywhere. But when you have someone that can hold space for you and reflect, then you can say, hey, I'm having this emotional and this thought and this, someone that can reflect with you and literally not try to fix you, because it isn't about fixing. It's just holding that space for love and kindness to actually emerge and to witness the power of being witnessed. And I think, we're so much feeling that right now. We're needing to be seen. We're needing to be valued. We're needing to be cared for. And we keep putting that outside ourselves with another person, but we need to see ourselves. We need to be witness ourselves, whatever that, that discovery of the big S self, not the ego self. It's like my true self. And that does take, a loving environment within yourself, but also having the witness of a loving person who's been there, who has been there, seen that, done that, got the t-shirt, the whole thing. That's, it's like every athlete needs a coach.
Yeah.
If you want to excel in the outer world, one needs a coach to help you go inward. Because really the most professional, the most elite athletes, it's a matter of the mind and the emotion and the balance. It's that cup that has to get emptied out. They already have the natural skill. It's really the internal makings that actually make the difference at that level, at the elite level.
You're so right. And this is, I just want to our leaders are going back to conditioning. I'm so excited about this. There aren't words. So going back to our conditioning, we condition leaders to believe that they have all the answers and the buck stops here. And when we get into this emotional runaway, and or if somebody comes to us with that, we're supposed to have everything figured out and fix it. And I'm going to give an alternative of, we don't have it figured out, and it's not our place to fix it. It's our place to listen and to just be there for somebody. And it's also our place to have our own coach and our own place that we go, even if it's not a coach you pay. If it's somebody, one of the things that I love about my relationship with Stephanie is that we're both on an inner journey. And there are so many times where I come to her and I'm in my emotional runaway. And I recognize that I'm in it and I still can't get out of it. And then she'll just say one thing and I'll be like, oh, thank you. And having somebody that can be there, like Stephanie used the word hold space. I have for years had a coach, and actually he's the same coach that Stephanie has, my spiritual coach. And one of the best things about him is that he believes in me and has a vision of who I could be that's different from my vision of myself. And it is bigger and more I still can't get to the point of having the same vision for myself that I know Daniel has for me. He holds such an amazing space for me. And I thought the ability for, in my mind, if I could be the person that Daniel sees that I am, wow. And having that somebody believes that in me that much, that's my goal as a leader, is to believe in all of the people around me that much that I can hold that space for them.
Until they're ready to step into it.
Until they're ready, with no shame and no pressure and that's the thing is, I don't feel any of that from Daniel of you should be this because I can see it in you. No, he just holds it for me. And that gives me the chance to see it for myself and pursue it for myself.
And this brings up a great topic around what we're going through right now in the way of mental health. There's a lot of shame around reaching out and asking for help. Because, it's coming from a place that I need to be fixed or you need to be fixed. And that's not true. None of us need fixing. It's actually coming from a place like when we're seeking someone to hold space for us, it's because we're ready to really love and really, really unlearn and to let go. And we need somebody to be able to hold that space safely in us for us to be able to process.
Yeah.
And so it comes from an act of self-love. And that's the big paradigm shift that I'm even putting as a call to action for all of us. It's like, where have maybe even you saw somebody else that, oh, geez, they're going to another workshop, or they're going to their psychologist, or they're getting another treatment. And it's like, what if you were able to say, way to go, you love yourself, like to that person, they love themselves so much, and that they're actually holding space for that. They're reaching out and connecting for those that are holding space for them. What if we could change the narrative? What if we could, the story of what we tell ourselves, that it isn't about fixing anything? Like, ultimately, the planet really doesn't need fixing. It does, and it doesn't, right? It's like, what needs fixing is the attitude or the thought to the beliefs. I believe that there is a saying that one of the great Native American teachers said, if we just cleaned up our thoughts, our stories about ourselves and each other and about the world, and we stopped telling like negative, harmful stories, gossip, complaining, we actually wouldn't have pollution.
That makes perfect sense.
So it's really what we need to stop doing.
Yeah. To
And
let
being.
go of. Because, like at the beginning, I mentioned what does it mean to be a full spectrum human being? And it is the consciousness that we have. And you talked about the conditioning, and that there needs to actually be a process of, like we need to have a practice. And so what is our practice of consciousness? And that really is what it comes down to is, do you have a practice of building your own inner consciousness?
Well, I think we even need to start one before that. It's like, whether you do or you don't have a practice, in order to be able to even have one, is that we need to stop. We need to just like totally stop. Stop whatever you're doing. Just stop. Stop it. Just stop. like, when did we tell ourselves that literally resting was a bad thing? I was talking with my husband, and he was saying, he goes, I've been conditioned that when I stop, I fall asleep. I said, yeah, because you've conditioned yourself that your value is what you do in this world. So the minute you stop and rest, your body says, oh, it must be time to go to sleep now. So you fall asleep. I said, what if you could stop that? What if you were, now because you're aware of it, now you've got the consciousness, the light, to be able to shine into that darkness, to go, oh, you mean I don't have to fall asleep when I stop now? I actually have value and worth of just being, of literally letting myself rest and receive. I said, yeah, it's like the UPS angel, right? We shared this. It's like, you order something, and then it comes from UPS, and it drops off to your door, and you're not home. So it goes away, and it comes back. It keeps leaving you little notes to remind you that you ordered this, but you're not home. It's about presence. And until you're home to receive, and that is an actual practice. So it isn't about doing anything. All you listeners out there, it's actually stopping.
And I think that the way you said it, of discovering our value separate from, of like, what is the purpose in stopping for all go-getters that need a reason, right? So there is a purpose in stopping, and that is to really find what is your value. If you didn't have any of the things that you do, could you say that you have value? And I know for myself, wow, I mean, there are still layers of that I'm working with and challenged by, and looking at the conditioning of how much I was taught that my value is based on what I do and what I bring to the world. And what would it look like if I had value just innately? And period, end of story, I have value.
So I'm going to end with this. I think this is a great place to end with a little story of the Horseshoe Nail. Because we can often think it's the big things in this world that make all the difference, but it actually is the tiny little things. So there's a story called the Horseshoe Nail. And it says, for the want of the nail, the shoe was lost. For the want of the shoe, the horse was lost. For the want of the horse, the rider was lost. For the want of the rider, the message was lost. For the want of the message, the kingdom was lost. All for the want of the horseshoe nail. It's the small little things. Each and every one of us is a horseshoe nail. And to be, simply be you. That is what is needed. That is the discovery. You're already enough.
I love that. So I would like to invite our listeners to stop this week and just give yourself, even if it's 2 minutes, give yourself 2 minutes of just being. Drop in.
And get to know you.
Get to know you and who you really are and value you. And I'd also like to invite you, over the next couple of weeks, we have some exciting things coming up. We've got a 12 Days of Christmas that we're going to be doing, and we're going to be talking a lot about our upcoming Entrepreneur Circle.
Which, by the way, the 12 Days of Christmas is also about being.
It is. It is.
Even though we're doing it, it's about being.
Isn't that interesting? And our Entrepreneur Circle is going to be called the Evolving Leader Circle. So we'll be chatting about that and what's going to start in the new year. So we'll look forward to seeing you and hearing you and on our Facebook page. So please join us there, the Soulful Leader on Facebook, or on just at the next Soulful Leader podcast. So see you soon.
And be you. The world needs you.
Yeah, we do. Thanks for listening.
And that wraps up another episode of the Soulful Leader Podcast with your hosts, Stephanie Allen
and Maren Oslack. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to dive deeper, head over to our website at thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com.
Until next time.